just like to, okay, so hello, happy International Women's Day. We are just going to provide a quick summary of some themes. And I would, of course, like to start first with huge personal thank yous to everybody. Because if you know about the history of this event, it's been ongoing process. So it's not a one-off thing. It's been going on, my work and work of many other scholars in the area of feminist futures and many women scholars that we're grappling with some similar ideas that feminist futures field is kind of focusing on. You know, it's been going on for a very, very long time. And the monograph was meant to capture that, because there is always a process, but then there are these moments in time. So when we think about the future, we often think about a particular moment in time, but there is an ongoing process. And I would just like to say, this is just one moment in time. We are pausing here today to give thanks and to acknowledge the work done before us, to acknowledge the work right now, and then to hopefully get inspired to do more. I think that would be my idea. So I would like to thank everybody, Anissa and Lavon, who did an absolutely amazing work and so much effort. You know, anybody who's edited anything knows how much work and thankless work and unpaid pro bono voluntary work goes into this. So thank you, Anissa and Lavon. I know how much you work here. And then obviously everybody who contributed and submitted an entry. Writing anything is not easy. Sometimes, you know, as we all know, we are often spread very thinly. You know, women in particular are kind of stretched between all sorts of tasks. And it's not easy to kind of do something like this. So everybody who contributed, and obviously all the authors who are part of the symposium, there are 30 people that contributed. So I would like to thank each and every one of you personally for contributing here and for using your own resources, financial, in time, in energy, and contributing so that we have this moment in time that stands for something and is hopefully going to be a springboard for many more things to come. I would also like to thank Journal of Future Studies and Tom Kang University. As you would be aware, this is all open source. It's all freely available, which is incredible in our times of predatory capitalism, to still have alternative spaces like this that enable marginalized voices to be heard, marginalized discourses to be heard. So Journal of Future Studies and Tom Kang University should really be applauded for still keeping that space and for years and decades working towards opening up spaces for alternative and inclusive futures. So these are my personal huge thanks, which I wanted to start with you. Start today, sorry, not with you. And what I also wanted to say is that you are probably also aware that Journal of Future Studies have a community of practice. The last event was with a personal heroine of mine, Raina Eisler, a futurist who is now 93 years of age and is a Holocaust survivor and has published an enormous amount of literature outlining in very simple but profound ways of what is ahead of us, what are our alternatives, how to think about history, how to think about our present time, how to think about change. She's a macro historian that is not often recognized as such, but yes, she is, because she is taking this very broad picture, thousands and thousands of years. The Chalice of the Blade, her bestseller, was published in the 80s. This was a book that informed me quite a bit working in the area of educational futures. And she very clearly talked about these two models of dominator and partnership societies and ways of being in this world. Now, we all are faced with this. We are faced with these choices on a daily level, in our work, in our life. We are constantly being bombarded with narratives such as this. This is UK's Telegraph wanting us to celebrate International Women's Day by saying boys are falling behind. Obviously, you know, this is not a new narrative. If you read the monograph or if you want to consult it, I do give a little bit of a historical background there, because as as we know, to do futures well, we need to know a little bit about history. Yeah, we need to know what came before us and what are the patterns before. So this narrative of feminism going too far or achieving too much. So it's both toxic and also, has already done everything that is to be done. It's been around for over 100 years, so it's nothing new. And we are constantly being bombarded with that. We are being bombarded by these type of narratives. Manosphere is coming back with a vengeance. It's been part of backlash since the 90s. And we have seen, and Raina Eisler has mentioned that we are seeing some sort of a resurgence in terms of the dominator paradigm coming up. However, US is just one country. Yes, it's one of the most powerful. Yes, these people are the wealthiest. Yes, they have lots of power, but this is not our world. This is not everything. There are always spaces for alternative knowings. And what we need to do is we need to be very careful not to buy into the narratives of what and who are the future. It's a projected future that is constantly being communicated to us. The dominator way of being is the way to be. So we have this guy who publicly proclaimed that the main problem for our civilization is empathy. The main problem for Western civilization is empathy. So this is why we have alternatives. It's not something wishy-washy in the air. Theories like feminist theory or epistemology is not there just for the sake of saying something different. It's there really for very practical implementations. All these events that I'm showing here on the screen wouldn't have been possible without alternative discourse. And even when we have this amazing technology now, such as AI, it can also be used for domination. It can also be used for, frankly, torturing other beings on this planet, both human and non-human. And this is why it's really important to think it through. What is it that we stand for? Where do we want to go? What are futures possibilities ahead of us? And how to actually get there? Now, today is the day of celebration, so I would like to not focus on the problems as much. They're always there. They've always been there. Our times are not unprecedented. Women activists have been murdered in the 18th and 19th and 20th century. And I'm not saying this is something that will happen, and is happening, but there is always a pushback. As I mentioned, Serbia earlier, there are now demonstrations all around the country where people are demanding that the country obeys the Constitution, follows the constitutions and the rules and laws. I mean, it's not much of a call. However, dominator paradigm comes in and then always uses violence to try to suppress all these alternatives. So given that it is a day of celebration, I'm going to focus on that just to remember, just to remind us that there have been incredible successes that women's and feminist movements, initiatives have contributing to our present moment. We do have a voice now, global voice, that is unprecedented. One of the SDG goals, number 5, is for gender equality, but all the other SDG goals are also part of bringing in this partnership, or I would call it feminist vision for the future, which is about equality, which is about inclusion, which is about respect of every living being and every human on this planet, whatever the creed is, wherever they're coming from, that every human being is equally valued, etc., etc. So this is something that we've got at a global level. We also have it at a global, regional, national, local, and individual level, this sense of empowerment, this sense of having more choices, this sense of being able to participate in decision-making more in the public sphere, not just in the private sphere, but also in the public sphere as well, which obviously impacts our private sphere and our lives, personal and professional. So we need to remember that there is a negativity bias, that our mind likes to go towards those difficult things. This is an evolutionary mechanism, that we have this Velcro for negative experiences. We try to kind of fight them or we try to survive them, and thus we put more focus on and we forget about all the positive ones. We also need to remember that even with all the backlash, there are always pendulum shifts. This backlash is happening in some places of this planet, not everywhere. Somewhere there is different type of movement. So there is diversity of movements. And also, even when you have the backlash, even when you do have this shift towards dominator paradigm, it's always possible to move it back. In terms of reality bias, I love Elise Boulding's work, who said that people often say, well, I just want to be realistic, but they actually take it as axiomatic that fears are realistic and hopes are unrealistic. So I would like to invite you to hope with a vengeance, to put all these thoughts that you already shared with us, even with even more force and even be even more vocal about them, because that's what we've got. We do have a voice now. Elise Boulding, like Raina Eisler, many of you would be aware, has written many, many books and has communicated this vision of what Raina Eisler calls partnership society and what Elise Boulding calls gentle society. We can also say society with empathy, society that wants to protect the vulnerable, society that we need if we are really going to make it. As Raina Eisler mentioned, dominator paradigm has that evolutionary dead end. It cannot survive without alternatives, and that is all of us working as a community, supporting each other and creating different systems that will get us out of our present predicament. She also invites us to remember that any superpower hegemony, any empire has also a very limited lifespan. When we think as futurists, when we don't think about immediate gratification, when we don't think about just today and tomorrow, but long term. And this is where her notion of 200 years expanded notion of present comes in. So when we think broader and when we think wider, there are lots of spaces for hope. And there are lots of spaces where we can do some action. I downloaded this PowerPoint template from Microsoft Windows, and it is for Women's History Month. So you have seen these timelines, but I was thinking, given that we gather here as people interested in futures thinking and futures, to structure our conversation perhaps like this. So do a reverse history in a way, or what's sometimes known as backcasting. And maybe if you would like, we can just spend 1 to 2 minutes for each author and everybody else who is present here today to just put few sentences there in terms of this reverse history timeline. So we've known what we've done so far, but then there is obviously a space in front of us, and maybe we can pause for a minute or two to just think about some of those events or ideas that we may want to expand into the future. We can write them in the chat. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. But I was just thinking to, as I said, structure our conversation a little bit. And first to spend 2 minutes just thinking about it and writing in a chat. And then we'll open the floor for other type of conversations, questions, random thoughts, comments, etc. So that after this process, very short process, because all of you know, whatever first comes to your mind is something that you probably spent decades, or in Joelle's case, not maybe decades, but years thinking about, because Joelle is, I believe, the youngest person here today. She is 17. So we have 93 to 17. I mean, Raina Eisler is not here with us physically, but she is in spirit with us here today. So we have this relevance of feminism across generations. Obviously, we can see it's relevant geographically, given that we come from so many different places, and it's relevant thematically. And each one of you is an expert in your area or multiple areas. Many of you I know work in multiple areas. So maybe the first thing that comes to your mind in terms of these important events or contributions yet to come, because I do believe we have a shared vision of the future. It's the future, I already specified what it is. You can fine-tune that as well, or you can challenge it. You can say, well, actually, we don't want that type of future. So this is something like we have another minute for this. So if you just want to type something in chat. I can't see the chat function, but I think this is enough now. And if you want to write something later, a paragraph or anything, please do so. Send it to myself, Lavon, or Anissa. As I said, this is an ongoing process. We will keep on working in this area. We will keep on contributing. You can just write, if you don't want to write a long piece, an article, you can write a paragraph or a few sentences. Send it to us if there is anything that today kind of wants you to keep on doing something, but you don't have time, or any other resources that are necessary to actually sit and write an article or a submission to JFS. Even Perspectives takes an effort, quite a bit of effort. So you can just send it to us either on LinkedIn or email, any thoughts you have, and then we will curate them. And obviously this hopefully will not be the last event that Journal of Future Studies Community of Practice does. Now this is the next thing. Yeah, so I'll finish in a second. Yes, sorry.
Do you want me to read some of the postings?
Just give me a second. Just give me a second to finish this sharing of screen. So this is the, when we finish this, I'll open the floor for that. But before you go, I would like to give you a present, because it is a celebration. And, when we have parties, you need to get what is that, a loot bag. Some of you may already have this, but for those of you that don't, these 3 stories are written from feminist epistemological framework. They're all about envisioning alternatives to our current predicament, mostly in relation to climate emergency, then violent conflict, and finally how our society and economy is structured. So they provide alternative from within feminist epistemological and theoretical framework. And this is something that I've argued for quite some time. It's not enough to be of a certain gender, because we know that women suppress other women. We know that we are all part of this dominator paradigm one way or another. There are other systems of oppression, racism, classism, ableism, and feminism is a framework that can be, in my view, consulted, developed, challenged, engaged with by persons from any gender. I made that argument. If women can be Marxist or Buddhist, so can men, feminists. I don't see any problem there. But what's different about feminism and feminist futures is that as a collective, as a social group, this is the best thing we've got so far that has been a collective effort based on women's and feminist movements of decades and centuries before us. So in terms of challenging patriarchy and challenging dominator systems, and we know gender is a critical factor here, how dominator systems are organized and how patriarchy feeds into all those systems, including predatory capitalism. We know that those systems exist, are very strong and powerful, and the alternative that specifically deals with gender aspects of these predatory system is the one coming from women's and feminist movements. And that has been consolidated around the ideas of women's studies, gender studies, and then feminist theory and epistemology. And then, of course, masculinity studies as well, that not manosphere, but critical masculinity studies that really engage with feminism rather than say, we're going to do pre-feminist thinking. So anyhow, this is a present. You can just go on a website. I think you can see the website there, Tales, and there is a code, and you can just download those ebooks for free. Obviously, the Hesitant Feminist Guide to the Future is also freely available, and so are all the entries in the symposium, and I can't stress that enough. So thank you so much. I'm going to close sharing of the screen here. The floor is yours. Anissa.
Okay, hang on a minute. I'm trying to do some technicality. Remove the beat from here. Okay, there we go. Right. Thank you, Ivana. As usual, we always have some, input and some knowledge, some learning extra stuff every day. And so I'm just gonna read some of the postings that people have put on, or in fact, you can, for people who has written something, you please feel free to, Yelena, would you like to take the mic and talk about what you've just posted?
And sorry to interrupt. Anybody else who wants to speak, please just raise your virtual hand, and then Anissa will do her best to again, get as many voices to be heard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'll do my MC duty, and for speakers, please take not too long so the other people have a chance. Thanks.
Just very briefly, I'm very pleased that within the past couple weeks, I've been working with young generation, with school students, and that group was only consistent of girls. And we did a very great job. I feel that our even though very brief but very productive workshops, they're changing their vision, especially of them as future generation movers, as females. Even though they were studying at a private college, still some biases, cultural biases, they burdening them. And through our conversation, through our activities, I see how they're they starting to think differently. So for me, that's very precious. I'm through.
Thank you. Thank you. So next we have Jillian. Jillian. Is Jillian still here? Hi, Jillian.
Yes, I am here. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I put some ideas that I included in my piece in the chat if anyone wants to see those. And I think the knowledge issue that Ivana talked about is really important. And I think what I'm engaged in really is trying to bring feminist knowledge into new, very applied areas more and more, because I think one of the major problems is the denial of the history of feminist knowledge and work and practice in policy and other arenas. So my work has always been kind of focused on that, and I don't see enough change there in a way. And I think that often I'm constantly reminded of it, but there's a body of feminist theory, there's a body of feminist practice, there's a body of feminist history. And feminism is always talked about in this kind of very superficial, as if it's of the now. So anyway, just to share, that's really a lot of what my work is focused on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jillian. Brazil, are you still here? Would you like to talk about a little bit about what you wrote on the chat?
Hello. First of all, happy Women's Day to all the futurists and to all women all over the world. I wanted to talk about femicide, and especially in Turkey, it is a major problem. It's not just honor killings, but complex homicide. And the reason why I use the term complex homicide, most recently, a Turkish woman who was working for a law firm as a legal assistant disappeared a few days as a result of intense media scrutiny, investigation, outrage. Some of her personal items surfaced: cell phone, bag, coat, and only a few days later she was found alive. And unfortunately, she did not survive. So there are several of these acts, and in the sense that it's not just illiterate people who are doing the honor killings, but it has a way of becoming more sophisticated and almost like a white collar criminals doing this. So I think it should be paid attention to, and obviously things really do not add up. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that because it's feminist is wide. I mean, well, obviously many countries, but Mexico, France, and several other countries. So just wanted to share that. Thank you. That's something that
you.
requires attention and scrutiny.
Thank you. Elaine, would you like to go next?
Hi. There's something in the UN Global Compact, in the gender parity pledge of businesses that sign up to the compact, which historically has been about setting out an empty chair with SDG 5 kind of on it to acknowledge that the women that are not at the table. And so there's really this, so it's something I try to do, but also a kind of an invitation to a movement to continue that, but also about setting out the empty chair, as it were, for the voice of Mother Earth, the voices of nature that are not yet included at the table. So there are some drivers of change, some signals like AI decoding nature and an ESG metric, nature as a stakeholder, nature as a board member. But again, this is the abstract concept of nature, but I would really, I would love it if we could, as of today or as of Monday, actually go into our spaces and in this kind of the subversive resistance, kind of set these empty chairs out for the women and for Mother Earth as this invitation for the feminist in all of us to acknowledge it. And it's very powerful. It's also very gentle, but it is quite a shaped people. So I do that. Sometimes I don't do it when I'm not very brave. But actually, it would be great if we could do that and actually start to share those examples. Just a thought to share.
Thank you. Next, we have Shadi. Hi, Shadi.
Hi, it's such a pleasure to be here. And I wanted to share something that's really beyond the discussion today. Something that really stood out because I just finished translating Ivana's monograph this morning into Farsi. And yes, it will be out hopefully soon. But to be mindful of time, when I was translating it, one thing that I realized was, and there is a chapter, of course, on language and how language shapes us, is that a lot of the Farsi is a single-gendered language, and a lot of the things, a lot of the diversities around feminism are actually very limited in different contexts, and it brought me to think in that space of inquire as to, do we really need more of this diversification, or do we when it was workable in a certain set of culture, in a certain set of linguistic tunnels, is it better to simplify? And the thing that really if I want to put out a milestone, again tying this back to Iran, where I am from, is that I don't think feminism in terms of the relationship that the state has with its women subjects, if you will use that term, if we can actually manage to pinpoint an actual article in the law or in whatever governance mode that we will have in the future. Maybe law will outdate itself, I don't know. But if we actually have that way to control the states, and then we can hold them accountable, the patriarchal state specifically, against the damages that it does to people. And I think that was one of the things that I saw in sometimes more manifest and sometimes more latent in the work of the feminist futurists that Ivana herself including have at the end of the monograph. So I'd like to see a day in the future where states can actually not harm women, whatever that is. I mean, I don't really necessarily have to go to Iran. We probably, the fact that we don't have gender equality shows that in every country in the world, there is in some way or another state violence against women. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Sana. Sana, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. I don't know, that's a bigger reflection. What I just put out there, that we should be really considerate about the values that we, like we were touching here upon already, the narratives that we use, and are we actually doing what we preach or so on. And I also pointed out there early on, I really liked Yelena's paper putting forward the idea that we sometimes might have feminism around when we're not even aware of it, and how could we make more of spaces like that available so that it's not like conflicting ideas that, well, I don't want to hear about feminism, but having these examples around us. And I think that's a lot to do with our inner development, our inner peace and reflection, and that kind of empathy, that by sharing that we can also promote a lot of these feminist values. So maybe that was just nothing deep and strong bed around these things that I was thinking about.
Yeah. Thank you, Sana. Who do we have next here? We have, sorry, let me get there because we have Esme Wilcox. Esme.
Hi, sorry, I couldn't make the raise hand work, so thank you, Cici. I guess kind of listening to a bit to all of you and thinking about kind of what makes us futurists, and there is something about kind of what is the stuff that we're noticing around us, and how do we think critically about it, and actually how important that critical thinking is, and how that's being squeezed out of a lot of education because of this very kind of this capitalist instrumentalist view of education to get the jobs. So I guess I was thinking about how important it is that we acknowledge that and counter that in our education systems. And I was imagining the kind of 2035, 2045, the new Education Act, being UK based with, it's the sort of public policy from law kind of angle coming in, that the most important thing that our education regulators do is look for how the spaces of critical thinking are prioritized within school, and that our teachers have the skills to be thinking about that as a competence, as a skill, rather than kind of one or other thing that they're teaching. And if we can take that with our young people, then that's the kind of way of engaging in the world that will be enormously important in whatever cycle of politics and dynamics that are coming forward for them.
Cool. Thank you, Esme. Next, we have Anika Kills.
Yes. Mine's also it's kind of an outcome from my paper, which is about, instead of having, I guess, or organizations that are writing new work on their websites as like their guiding principles, and saying that, which is basically just perpetuating a idea of individualized, self-actualizing work for especially for a certain idea of a person, mostly men, that we have, when we're thinking of new work in the future, it will be something that really recenters, for example, care work, like really reevaluates care work from the performed activities to like all the like the feminine characteristics that are undervalued in care work right now. We like that this idea of new work is based on structural intersectionality. This is like a foundational like I guess a dimension in organizational structures, like a core principle that is guiding, like that's guiding hiring principles, for example. This would just be like an idea of like seeing this like reimagined idea of new work materialize. And also just to link, because I'm researching, I'm doing a PhD on social foresight now, and I was thinking everything that also everyone has contributed so far, like it would be I guess a significant event if the capability of social foresight, or like the ability to do futures thinking, or futures literacy, as some people call it, if that would be an actual, imagine that would be like a mathematical ability, like the way it's asked in school now that gets a grade at the end of the year, like on your paper. Imagine you would have to do in a way, like we can question the whole exams like style of education, but I'm just saying if we had something like that, that would actually be asking and measuring the way of like futures thinking ability, that would really show that this has become a mainstream recognized capability. That would be really nice.
Yeah, an alternative assessment, right? Other than just academic performance.
Yeah.
Right. Stephen, you're up next.
Thanks, everyone. Coming from kind of my perspective that I wrote on, which was on feminist futures and quantum social theory, I want to critique your timeline, Ivana, that you pull down from Microsoft. And it's this linear sort of time. So what I want to see in the future is a feminist PowerPoint presentation framework that can already integrate, you know, some of these ideas of nonlinearity and time is fluid and it's interconnected, and the many stories that are not told that are part of history, are part of the future. But our futures cone always starts with the present. And it's like, no, there's all these other elements that need to be considered, but because we want to control time and put it in the present and use that as our starting point, let's use feminist sort of critiques and a holistic approach to look at everything. So next time, Ivana, let's create a feminist PowerPoint, I don't know what you want to call it, framework that is really no, it's not laziness. It's like it just shows you how these are embedded in society, that Microsoft owns this. And who is Microsoft? It's a masculine brain in many ways. So let's challenge that.
Okay. Yeah. I was just saying, I was just thinking when you said that, Stephen, women's timeline is everything all at once. You know? Right. Okay, who do I have next on my list? Hang on a minute. Let me go back. Oh, this thing is not very good, is it? Okay, so I had oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Hang on. Stephen, and then I have Zorana.
Hi everyone. And good to see you all, especially you, Ivana. I would like to say a couple of words about what Ivana already mentioned, which is the student uprising here in Serbia, which I think is going under the radar of the world and under the radar of Europe, which is the closest here to us. So I'm based in Belgrade, and everything started when there was a collapse of train station in Novi Sad on the 1st November. 15 people were killed, 2 severely injured, and unfortunately they will remain severely injured under the rest of their lives. One guy is still in coma. So and then really people start protests against corruption and against these authorities that they say that only they're 12 years on power right now, but I would say, looking at the back, that there are 30 years on power right now. The same people who actually provoked the wars in ex-Yugoslavia are still on power. So we're still struggling with that, facing the past and what has been done in our name. And this is the totally new generation that came and took the streets. And I'm impressed how they work in solidarity, how they spread empathy across the country. One of the methods is well-known method in a peace work, which is the walking from one place to another, like a peaceful walk. And there are literally conquered cities across Serbia. Like there are people are greeting them like they're liberators of the cities. So it's really impressed that this young generation, these are people in their 80s, 90s, 20s, they're willing to lose one student year of their lives. These are people who are studying medicine, IT, but not only social science. And this is the most impressive thing, that other students from other fields also joined, not only philosophy or political science or social science, but medicine. And they're all stood in and still standing in solidarity. And they really want, as Ivan already mentioned, for laws and constitution to be respected. To be honest, and I will maybe finish with a little bit darker tones. I don't know where where this whole thing will end it, and in what way. We also have pretty complicated situation around the world. So we are not in the focus, of course, but we have to somehow support this political, peaceful movement and spread the word about it. And I would really like to see the similar events across the world, because I think that young people are pretty neglected from any point of view, and that what we thought that is a lost generation is actually a newly found generation. So I'm really impressed with all of that. But maybe it's not so optimistic. I'm sorry. Ivana knows that I'm very pessimistic, but yeah. Thank you so much.
I think it's all positive, and I hear young people participating. That's good news, right? Okay, so we have next Hazel. Is Hazel here?
Yes, hello. I'll try to turn on my camera. Let's see what it says.
Hi, Hazel.
Yeah.
Would you like to, would you like to talk a bit about what you've written here?
Yeah, I was actually just looking for or trying to translate some things. So I work here in Finland, and so most of our materials are in Finnish. But when it comes to transformation and change, I've sort of seen there seems to be a lot of backlash to change that I deem positive. Maybe not everyone, and maybe people here think that that furthering of rights to more groups is a positive thing, but not everyone thinks that. And in order for change to happen somehow, I wrote about sneaky change. I don't know, I just made that up, but I was thinking, like, how can we be smart and sneaky agents for change? It's probably to make the backlash waves smaller and actually change at the bottom where nobody notices, and then we actually get it done without any of the fuss or violence, actually. And we've been using this. I was trying to look for it in English. I couldn't find it. So translated, it's called cultural mapping, but there's also a tool called cultural mapping, which is a completely different thing. So the Google was just full of that. But basically, it's sort of a backcasting thing. But I can put it in the. I just translated the process. You can do it very easily in an hour with a group of people. If you already have a vision, you start with, like, what is the vision or the end result we want to see? And then you go backwards. What behavior is needed to create action that go in line with that vision? Like, how should we be behaving in order to have that vision come true? And then before that, what kind of structures support this kind of behavior? Like, what structures do the behaviors need? And then before that, what kind of thinking or thought frameworks sort of create those structures? So assumptions, attitude, values, understandings, and prejudice, like, what do we need to unravel or make disappear? So I find this sort of very deep work is slow, of course, but sometimes we don't do that kind of work of thinking of what are our values, what are our taboos or mental blocks or things that keep us in doing that same thing. I'll just post it in the chat, and yeah, we've done this with a few groups, and I always find it like very enriching. So sometimes, of course, it's valid to do futures work in the sense of where are we now and what do we want to have, and then think of the pathway there. But then once you actually have that vision, and when you start thinking of how to actually, like, what are the actionable things, then it's not enough to just think, okay, we'll do things A, B, C, and we'll get there, because there's so many things blocking it. And this is, I found, a very interesting sort of tool for talking about, for putting words to what might be blocking us.
Okay, thank you, Hazel. Joelle, would you like to chime in?
Well, I just wanted to say firstly to Ivana, thank you. It's been great to hear a lot of your conversations and your insights. This was the first publication I've ever written, and it was definitely a journey with a lot of revisions and no, yeah, but it was great. It was something that I was really passionate about. It was, yeah, I fell into the perspectives piece, and yeah, it's been great to listen to all of you. My piece was focused on time inequality, and I spoke a lot about my mom and a lot of the other women in my life. I've been raised in, well, firstly, I'm German, but I was born and raised in the Philippines, and so sort of this like cultural duality has really influenced how I see myself, my role, not just in my household, but also at school. And hopefully through this piece, I've kind of tried to challenge a lot of these ideals, and question why at school and why in the classes and the people I surround myself today, the boys in my class, for example, still think that, women belong at home, or that it's these little things that have inspired me to write this. And yeah, it's been great to listen to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joelle. Next up, we have Tina. Hi, Tina.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to add there the link about the inner development goals, because we talk a lot about sustainability and how we are not really getting there, and things are getting kind of better and then not again getting very, we don't really get to the goals as we are hoping to get. by 2030. So I wanted to just add there that there is this wonderful global movement in development goals. And there are a lot of different opportunities to act. In all countries, there's different hubs. There's those who are interested in research or are from universities, or maybe they are business oriented, to make a difference and really focus on the inner development, because these concepts of love, care, compassion, we will never survive without these. And it's like a counter movement to this very, very harsh talk of this day. So I highly recommend you all, if you are not yet familiar with it, to have a look and see what's maybe taking place back home in your cities, and bring these wonderful voices, what you are here sharing with us, to that movement as well, because it's very needed. So that's all. Thank you. And thank you, Sanna, for inviting me to join. I'm very, very happy. Thank you, Sanna, and all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Tina. So we have time for one last person. Carol Lim from Singapore, please.
Hi, everyone. I just really enjoy the conversations here. And I think I just want to share that last week, the global organization that I'm part of, Teach the Future, I think some of you were there as well. So definitely see Sabrina, see Steven. And I think that you will agree with me that the themes that we've been discussing here were some of the themes that came up very prominently in the 24-hour online conversations that we had with young people at the World Futures Day online conversations, Young Voices, last week. For example, this whole idea about the concept of time, right, came up in, I think, the last conversation at the end of the 23rd hour. The last conversation was actually about intergenerational fairness. And the two facilitators who brought up this topic actually shared how in Barcelona is the first country, in this first city in the world, to look at time poverty and the right to time as an important aspect of urban management. The lady, the leader championing this is a lady. And so our conversation around it really became very interesting, because we started talking about this whole idea of how Anglo-Saxon language has really conditioned our idea of time to become very linear. I speak Mandarin. I also speak Japanese. In Mandarin and in Chinese and Japanese, we don't have grammar in the sense of like tenses the way we have it in English. And that really changes our concept of time, because we do not think about things in present tense, past tense, future tense in that sense. And I think I also brought up the point that I feel that that very linear way of thinking actually really doesn't gel well with the way I see my role as a full-time working mom all the time, because I feel like this concept of time has been imposed on me that I need to compartmentalize my time. But really, the most efficient way for me to work as a full-time mom is to try and mesh some of these different roles up at the same time. And so what I try to do is very often I try to find ways to bring my kids to the workplace or to the things that I do. And I just feel that that's such an important part of like going back to also what Ismail was talking about, education. So other than Teach the Future Singapore Hub, where I'm a co-founder, I'm also involved in a social enterprise in Singapore, where we are currently prototyping what we call a ground-up movement, which we call the School of Life. And it's really a response to this overemphasis on exams and grades, especially in an East Asian society like Singapore, right? It's just phenomenal. We have a $1.5 billion industry in tuition, which is like the shadow education industry for a 7 million city-state, a $1.5 billion industry. And having said that, we are supposed to be one of the world's like best education systems, and yet we have such a shadow education industry. Says a lot about how obsessed we are with grades, and I think it has come with a lot of the costs that sometimes we might not even be humble enough to acknowledge. So we have been running a series of webinars involving adults together with young people. We are going to run more with the parent support groups of our middle schools and high schools here, where we're going to get parents to join with their teenagers. To really come together to talk about some of these, starting the conversation with these prompts from figures from our own national youth surveys, where it consistently highlights that young people are most stressed by the top 3 things, which is about career, uncertain world futures, and about finances and mental wellness. Right. And then it correlates a lot with other global data about workplace, where employers feel that the young people who enter the workplace these days lack the critical thinking and the adaptability and the life skills and the soft skills that's needed. And together with that, also global data that says teachers surveyed actually feel that they are not very well equipped to teach social emotional learning in the classroom. Right. And the truth of the matter is, as it is, more than 50% of our children today are going to go into jobs that do not exist currently. So there's this whole massive thing that seems to be moving more and more rapidly, but I think the fundamental core values and these core life skills have just not really been addressed. And we are co-creating a whole new way of teaching, so to speak, teaching or rather learning life skills with young people, looking at how we can learn life skills away from the school environment, and with adults who might not necessarily be authority figures in their lives. So not teachers, not parents necessarily, but more of mentor figures in the community. And how can we bring these mentor figures in the community together with young people and also do it differently from the school, because school tends to do it according to the age bands. And we just want it to really mimic life, which means that it's intermixed. So we have the 13-year-olds in the same class, in the same conversation with the 18 and the 19-year-olds, and they talk about life. So today's prototype class this morning in Singapore here was about money management. And well, I mentioned about putting my kids, bringing them along with me to work. So my second and my third boy comes along with me every time I run these School of Life prototypes. And at the end of today's session, I kind of had a debrief with my kids to find out what they think about today's lesson. And this was what my 12-year-old told me. He said that for once, math made sense.
Makes sense.
It finally made sense, because all the kinds of problem sums that the teachers make them do in school, it's obscure scenarios. And this time round with this lady who is a financial consultant, she comes in and she talks to them about things like budgeting, things like buying houses in future, things like you need to save up money, things like, have you thought about you need to buy life insurances? These are things that completely blew the young people's minds, right? And then my 12-year-old said this. He ended off with his feedback telling me, this is education. And I thought that was so powerful. I never really thought that was the impact that a 12-year-old could think about education completely differently. So yeah, I just feel that it's really relevant, all these different things that we're talking about. And I think that we need to have more of these conversations, not just only happening in Singapore, but happening all around the world. Yeah, and then to take action.
Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you. I think this is a really very good way to summarize everything we've been doing. As many of you mentioned, our minds have been colonized, and thank you, Stephen, for pointing that out. It's just, it's the ease with which these dominator systems kind of are all around us and make it difficult to use alternatives. I did write about that in the monograph as well, or presented at a conference, Asia Pacific Futures Network conference in Bangkok, how much more effort And given what Joelle was writing about, you don't always have time for that, but you have to put this extra effort all the time to create alternatives that are based on different way of seeing priorities in our lives. And priority should be life, it should be survival, it should be well-being, not so much buying houses and making a profit, isn't it? So, you know, this is what we are trying to do collectively. It's not easy, and because it's not easy, we need a community of practice. We need to gather around these ideas and try to do as much as we can wherever we are. But as Eisler was also talking about, we need a template. We need a cognitive template that unites us, because other than that, it's scattered and, you know, it can be, you don't really know, you get confused. So it's important to do, as somebody mentioned here, both theoretical work and practical work, see how all that interlinks, because ultimately it is about our lives and the lives of future generations to see what we do now actually matters. So one kind of strand is to decolonize from all these dominator patriarchal everything around us, everything's. And the other one is to envision alternatives and to support them and promote them and nurture them the way we nurture life. We need to, Willow can tell you all about that, give birth to these alternative and different futures and bring something else into existence. So thank you so much for being here. I hope we continue the conversation. I did post a link of my next thing, which is also going to be using lots of feminist thinking around the notion of digital education and scenarios for education specifically. So Anissa, do you want to have the final word here?